Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United. Hello and welcome back to All for United. That is a weird layout. Plenty of Reds on the panel. We want to get you guys involved as well. Get in the live chat. Have your say on the breaking news this lunchtime. Richard Arnold is to replace Ed Woodward at Manchester United as the CEO. Manchester United have released a statement. Richard Arnold will become formally within his position as Chief Executive Officer effective from the 1st of February 2022. Ed Woodward will step down from his role as Executive Vice Chairman on the exact same date. Richard Arnold has said, "I'm honoured to have the chance to serve this great club and its fans. I'm determined to return that honour in any way I can." Joel Glazer, boo, has said, "I'd like to thank Ed for his tireless work on behalf of Manchester United during his 9 years as Executive Vice Chairman and 16 years with the club. We're now looking forward to Richard and his leadership team opening a new phase in the club's evolution with ambitious plans for investment in Old Trafford, the strengthening of our engagement with fans, and continued drive towards our most important objective, winning on the pitch." Interesting. James, let me bring you in as well, pal. Looking good. Look, interesting. Fred, let me come to you because you're the guy closest to me. First of all, I suppose your general reaction on the news. We have a date that Ed Woodward is leaving the club. That is going to be February, start of February. And we've got Richard Arnold taking over. I'm going to tell you a bit more about Richard Arnold in just a second, but for now, your thoughts, please, Fred.
Hi, chaps. I think it is a positive. Time will tell if it's a very good move or not. To be honest, it's not totally unexpected. This has been bubbling and it's been in the pipeline for the last 6 months to a year when Woodward announced it around the beginning of last year. Something had to change. New leadership was needed. So hopefully this is the beginning of a brighter future for the club. There's no doubt that Ed Woodward has been one of the reasons as to why we've had troubles in the last 8-9 years. We've got a top-down problem as much as we do have a bottom-up with the players on the pitch. We've just been managed with no long-term strategy in mind. So, yeah, I think overall it is a positive. Time will tell if it's the right decision or not. I'm just catching up on reading the articles, and it's saying that Arnold's very focused on leaving the football people to make their own decisions as opposed to getting involved heavily in that area, something that Woodward was quite heavily criticised for. So yeah, at the moment it's being spun as a positive in that regard. I think the big positive is that Woodward's he's, from what I'm reading, he's certainly leaving at the end of the season. There was talk that he was going to be in a consultancy role, and I think there was a bit of a worry that he'd be pulling the strings behind the scenes in that capacity. But it's, at the end of the day, we just have to hope. We have to hope that this is a positive change for the club. We've got Ragnick in. The club have obviously identified that the top-down structure has been a problem and it's affected the performances on the pitch. So, yes, time will tell if it's a success or not. But ultimately, as long as he lets the footballing people, i.e. Murtagh, Fletcher, Ragnick, steer the ship on that side, and he and Judge and his other corporates focus on the revenue side of the game, then we should be in good stead. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, James, let me come over to you, mate. Thank you for joining us. Just your initial reaction this lunchtime, whilst you're enjoying your lunch, to the news that Arnold's to replace Woodward, and Woodward is gone first week of Feb.
Yeah, when I first saw it, to be honest, it kind of reeks of the whole Manchester United, oh, there's some negative news, so we're going to give you something shiny to look at kind of thing. Like, all we're reading is about 11 people or 17 people, disenchanted with Ragnick and his training sessions, and then the next thing you know, a news story breaks that Woodward's not going to be here come February. So I don't think that's by accident. I think that's probably planned by the club. I'm with Fred. I think it's a positive thing. I do. Like, Woodward was obviously instrumental in the Glazer takeover in 2005 and then got the role in 2007. Since then, it's been disaster after disaster, and not necessarily on the pitch. Early on, there was some success, but with regards to transfers and decisions and financial decisions. They've not been good enough. I'm sure we'll get into that later on, but they've really not been good enough considering he's an accountant. Some of the decisions that he's made are astounding. And the same goes, like Richard Arnold is also an accountant, which I thought boded well, but maybe not. But overall, it's a positive. I'm happy for the change. Obviously, he was supposed to be leaving a while ago. Then it got extended to December. Now it's been extended to February. And then Fred just said, he'll be gone by the end of the season. I just hope we don't keep on getting extensions and he literally is out of the football club, because at first I wasn't averse to him staying on as a commercial director. He's obviously very good on that side of things. He makes the club a lot of money. If you want a tractor deal, or you want, a noodle deal, then he's absolutely superb at that. But he should be staying out of all football matters and leaving that to Murtagh, to Fletcher, to Ranić and Ranić's staff. So yeah, that's my opinion on it. Overall, pretty positive, mate.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get some tweets out and pushing some bits out there. But a very good point you make in terms of the timing, given the unrest, that now Woodward has finally decided February the 1st, 3 weeks, let's get out of here, despite all the rumours around what he was potentially going to do and the fact that, we are in limbo when it comes to management. So it is an interesting time to change the hierarchy around and to spin it. John, again, just a blanket reaction from you on the news. Would you expecting it today? Is it coming soon? What are your thoughts on it?
I wouldn't say I was expecting it today, but clearly it's been in the pipeline for some time. He announced his resignation during the Super League debacle. I think that was back in April, wasn't it? So it's been a long 10 months. Some would argue he should have gone sooner. But yeah, it's a positive step. Like James mentioned, it's coincidental that it's been fed out at a time of unrest in the dressing room. In many ways, it being announced now is in a way poetic for how he's run the football side of things, that the squad, we've perhaps never known it to be as bad as it has been with all the leagues coming out the past couple of days. And he's in many ways directly responsible for that. A lot of the players aren't good enough, they're overpaid, he's spent loads of money on transfers which haven't worked. And possibly the worst thing he did wasn't as CEO, it was advising and supporting the Glazers take over the club back in 2005, wasn't it? But having said that, though, I hope it's a positive step, because in many ways the people who we as United fans despise more after Woodward, it is the Glazers, and he was very much the Glazers man. And he, like I say, he supported them to buy the club, and he's been their man for the past 8 years or 9 years, I think. But yeah, so he has to go. Coincidentally, it is the start of February, which is when the transfer window is closed. Does that mean we won't do very much this month on the transfer front? That is certainly worth keeping an eye on with the restructure that's going on behind the scenes and that. So, but yeah, it's a positive move, and hopefully it'll be good for us in the future going forwards.
The rumours are, no, we're not going to do any business this window, but historically the January window is very hard to do business in. And, you see names flying around like Zakaria, Kamara, like these type of players, Julian Alvarez. And ultimately, we come back to what we keep saying on shows, and we can't lose sight of that. We need specialists in their positions. And even myself, I'm not convinced that Zakaria is a specialist. He might be better than Fred and McTominay at holding a midfield partnership together, but I'm not convinced that he is the man to push United towards silverware. So I think ultimately Manchester United need to make the right decisions this month. Look, we've got a temporary manager. We've got potentially someone else coming in the summer. The squad's at unrest, as James hit on earlier on, and also on top of that, we're changing around the hierarchy. So we've got to be sensible this window. If an opportunity arises, yes, let's have a look at it. But hey, we can't just go out and spend money and bring players in just willy-nilly this window who potentially maybe give us a 1% better chance of winning a midfield battle. I don't think it's as clear cut as maybe some people make out on social media, despite the need to strengthen, of course, in numbers, especially in the middle of the park. Tom, you've just joined us. Before you do, I just want to quickly give a little fact file on Richard Arnold. I think the interesting thing with Richard Arnold is he's a best mate of Ed Woodward. They met each other at Bristol University in 1993. By trade, he's a chartered accountant. He joined Man United in 2007 as a commercial director. His responsibility was the growth of the club's sponsorship and business. He then started working closer with Ed Woodward over the past 7-8 years. He started overseeing all operational aspects of the club, including attending club investor conference calls and also leading some of the fan forum calls as well. I think the rumours of his takeover were always going to be there and thereabouts. But the interesting thing with Woodward leaving and Arnold coming in is the change of job titles and job roles. Ed Woodward was always the executive vice chairman. Richard Arnold is coming in as the chief executive officer, which I believe is more like what David Gill was when he worked so closely with Sir Alex Ferguson than, so to speak, Ed Woodward being very much commercially minded around the fact that his job was obviously, hey, you take care of football matters and sponsorship and our finance and the conversations between the Glazers and the club. Whereas it looks like Richard Arnold's going to be a little bit more like, hey, I'm building a team to manage different areas of the businesses. I'm going to manage those teams. And that's the difference between a CEO and an executive vice chairman. Either way, this is more a business move than it is potentially something that affects the immediate impact of what happens on the field. Of course, in the long term, this has huge implications for what happens on the field, but we've got to give it time. We have to give it time, just like John Murtough as a director of football. Let's wait and see where this goes. You know, over the past year or so, we've known that the Ed Woodward's going, and there has been certain aspects within the football club that has changed, like John Murtough becoming director of football, like Darren Fletcher becoming technical director, like also Manchester United looking for a women's football director. So clearly they're looking to build a footballing team. And clearly what Richard Arnold's job is going to be is to manage the teams more than to actually manage the actions of the team. Of course, there's always going to be that input from people at board level. That just happens in business. You're never going to be able to stop that. It happens in every institution. But ultimately, then, it's about having the right people on the board. And Sir Alex Ferguson, by the looks of it, is on that board, as are a number of other investors and people. But it doesn't look like Ed Woodward will be staying on that board after the summer. It looks like he's on it up to the summer to help with the transition for Richard Arnold. Anyway, that's everything I know to this point. So, Tom, I suppose the first question more around the Arnold appointment comes to you. Can you see this working better than potentially Woodward has in the last 8 years? I don't know who sort of said it, but there was a comment made there about the fact that Woodward literally controlled everything and was trying to manage everything within the football club. And then he was the fall guy. Do you think this sort of setup works a bit better, which Arnold's coming in to so to speak, do?
Yeah. Again, just said what you were saying just then about his accountancy side and what his part of the business has been up until this point. Excuse my voice, by the way. I just realised how terrible it is. He was actually responsible for the team viewer deal on the United shirt. Now, he was responsible for that deal, and it was a £253 million deal that he closed. So he was responsible for that. But again, I didn't expect this when I woke up this morning. We all knew that this time was coming. We all knew that Ed Woodward wasn't going to stick around, although there was a certain comment made by himself that he may stay to oversee the long-term appointment of a manager if necessary. Well, we now know that's not necessary. It's not going to happen. But what I found interesting when I was doing my doing some research is the fact of Ed Woodward's never at Old Trafford. He hasn't been at Old Trafford. He's in his United office in London. The difference with Arnold is he's at Old Trafford all the time. He is there. And word is he will be there to oversee every single part of this Ralph Rangnick era from here all the way through till they appoint a new manager. And you were asking the difference as well. One of the biggest differences that I could get is the fact of, while he will oversee all the football inside of it, rather than doing all the accountants and putting a money man in charge, he's actually going to put John Murtough and Darren Fletcher first and foremost point of contact for everything. All the decisions will be through Murtough and Fletcher. Final decision obviously will come down to Arnold, and he will be on tune with them anyway. But all the football decisions go through them. I think it'll work because he seems like a guy that first a call for him was to speak to all the investors, speak to all the shareholders, and ask them about their take. He wants data. What that means, I have no idea. But he's obviously a man that's keen to come in straight away and start putting right where this stuff's gone wrong. And he speaks well. He's very proud to be doing his job. He's looking forward to getting in there. So I think from the first surface value of it so far, I think it's a much better situation than it is with Ed Woodward. Don't get me wrong. Ed Woodward could sell snow to the Icemen. You know, he could. He's good at that. But we're moving away from that, and we're doing what we should have done 8 years ago, and that's focus on getting the best on this pitch to represent Manchester United week in, week out. Arnold's going to allow Murtagh and Fletcher the freedom to do that. He will consultate with them, and between the three of them, they will oversee everything that happens from here on out, hands-on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I do think it's going to be more hands-on. And I do like the noise coming out of the club and from different sources as well about the type of person he is. From what I've heard as well from the guys on the fan forums, as you said, there he's a good speaker. He's a passionate speaker. Look, he's a finance man. And the Mike Love United Hate the Glazers clan is going to hate that. And so a lot of people who are Glazers out are going to hate that. I think we're all Glazers out on this panel. But, you know, when someone gets a new job, you've got to give them the benefit of the doubt and have a look and see what they do. I mean, Fred, let me come over to you quickly there. Do you have concerns about the fact that he's another finance man? I mean, you don't expect someone like Gary Neville or Paul Scholes or Roy Keane to come in as a CEO, do you? So who else do people expect to get these roles?
Exactly. No, there's no real surprise that someone in that capacity is in that role. You wouldn't expect an ex-footballer with no experience being a CEO or, you know, leading a company in that regard. So no surprise there. There is a concern, I think, that he has been at the club during Woodward's tenure. He did facilitate the takeover, as previously mentioned, and he just comes from a similar background to Woodward. So. Look, time will tell or not if he has a radical sort of different views compared to Woodward or not. But there definitely are question marks. I think in the short term, he's going to want to prove himself. So there will be radical changes initially. He is going to probably change the structure from what's coming out. More autonomy is going to be given to Murtagh and Fletcher and Ragnick if he does go into the consultant role. But the other thing is, it's when there's a change at that type of level, it's always a long-term change. You know, it's very rare that you're going to see changes on the football pitch in the short term. It's all long-term when it's at board level. So it's all about strategy setting. Is he going to get the best in class off the field, on the field? Is he going to ultimately trust the footballing side of the executive board? So Murtagh, is he going to devolve all of the football decisions to them and not interfere like perhaps Woodward did? Time will tell. But I think ultimately it's a positive change needed to happen. It's a shame that it's taken this long, and it's a shame that it actually took the ESL fiasco for this to happen, because if that didn't happen, Woodward probably would have still remained at the helm. So time will tell. Hopefully the Glazers, you know, just devolve all what responsibilities to him, which they do. They don't really care about the club. We all know that. But hopefully he leaves the footballing decisions to those who know what they're doing, and he can then focus on the the day-to-day responsibilities that a CEO would usually do.
Guys, get in the live chat with your thoughts. I'm going to skim down the live chats now and get some on screen and take some of the thoughts to the guys on the panel. So what do you make? Arnold replacing Woodward going. Has there been any successes we can enjoy and reflect on with Ed Woodward? Are there any big failures that you wanted us to discuss? Arnold coming in, have you read anything about him that you want us to take a look at and potentially clear up? There's some reports coming out from Henry Winter from Ed Woodward's camp that I'll jump into in a little bit. And we'll go over some bits and pieces on him in a second as well. Brendan Chappell having his say on Richard Arnold, the guy who contributed to the culture of failure. How is he going to improve things? Sean Fool says, don't just blame Ed Woodward. He has been successful financially. I don't think we've sort of come in here and gone, Ed Woodward's a pile of crap. you know, thank God he's gone, blah, blah, blah. I think we've justified why maybe we've not been happy with his performance in his role at the club. And I think when you say that he's been successful financially, the cost of living's gone up massively. The cost of business has gone up massively. The financial impact in sport has gone up massively. And if you can't sell and function a financially positive institute around the biggest sporting club and environment on the planet, then ultimately he's not good at his job. I think any marketer or salesman can sell Manchester United to a sock company, to a tractor company, to a tyre company. So I don't know if you can judge his success on the financial growth of Manchester United, because I think other teams have seen similar financial growth. They're just not as big as us. They're not as financially expendable as us. But in the market, and if you look at it, of course, but then where's the money gone? That's the issue with it. David Archer, actions speak louder than words. Arnold can talk the talk, but he needs to walk the walk and leave the football side alone. Yeah, I think we're all with you there.
I think he will, if I could, Ben. I think he will. I just wanted to clarify what I was saying. I think I messed up a little bit. Basically, Murta will sign every final decision off, but all footballing decisions will go through Murta, Fletcher, and Ranić. And obviously, if Ranić goes up top, it'll be through him and then the manager. If Ranić stays in, it'll be those three.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think obviously with a consultancy role as well with Ranić, again, he's building a footballing team there of people that can have a look at the footballing side of things and build out who we are, what we are. And obviously decisions will be made by those people as well around the investment that's needed in the stadium, in the training pitch, in the dressing room. It's all part of the footballing sphere, so to speak. Connor says, I do wonder why this has been announced now. Agreeing with you, I think it was James, you made that point, didn't you? Big distraction away from recent performances. Loads of chats coming in here, actually. Adrian says, accountants making the right decisions? No, can't be. They're all honest, aren't they? If only everyone knew about what was going on in a financier's life, you wouldn't trust them again. Go check out jerseys. Loads of stuff coming in. Reece says, if Arnold wants to make any physical change and improvement, don't give the control to Murto and Fletcher. Give it to Ranić and make Murto and Fletcher his understudies. Well, I think that's depending on how the next couple of months go, doesn't it? But again, I don't think anyone can argue, just quickly, against Murto being in the position he's in. I think you need to go back and have a look at his success and achievements within the game and have a look at what he's also done at the club and pioneered at the club. I think it's very wrong. I can understand the questions around Fletcher because he's very new to anything like this. But Murto's a very experienced football person and has done a lot of good at this club. So I don't think we should be directing hate towards him. Sorry, Fred, do you want to just quickly jump in on something?
Just a very quick comment on the timing. It was actually announced, I think, just before Christmas that the change was actually happening. They have to, because we're on the New York Stock Exchange, they have to release it to the market. And then they formally release it to the media. Is generally 2 to 3 weeks after they've assessed how that piece of information will affect the stock price. So I don't think it's a huge surprise. I was personally expecting it sometime in January, maybe it's a couple of days after the Wolves defeat. That's probably a little bit of a surprise, but I think it was always going to happen either this week or next week.
Yeah. Let's quickly go away from Arnold then. And James, I'll come to you quickly first. Tony Squire says, in terms of commercial deals, Woodward, he has been brilliant and he's generated the club huge revenues. Look, we haven't had a stable manager under him. We've had poor decisions made financially. I still think there's been an underinvestment in the training ground and the stadium, which potentially you would expect your vice chairman to do more about when there's clear issues. But we have grown with a growing commercial market. Debt's still there, though. I suppose my general question is, how would you judge Woodward's performance?
How would I judge it? Be polite. No, in certain things he's done well, like you say, the commercial side of things. However, you would expect that, right? So we're a football club. It's not hard to sell Manchester United to various companies. So on certain things he's done well and he's made the club money. However, I think people are failing to remember how much he's cost the club in terms of extending deals for players that don't deserve deals, in terms of blowing up the wage structure when signing off on the deals like Alexis Sanchez deal, when you're essentially bringing in someone at £400,000 a week, and therefore you're causing unrest amongst the team because everyone else, like rightly so, David De Gea is then knocking at your door and saying, why is he on £400,000 a week? I've won more player of the league title, like player of the season than anyone else. Like I must deserve to be among the higher players, paid players. So there's certain things he's done well. There's certain things he's not done not so well. I would classify it as a failure. At the end of the day, he has overseen, like you said, countless hirings and firings of managers. How many of those can we say was a success? David Moyes clearly wasn't. Van Gaal, yeah, we won an FA Cup, but probably not a success. Mourinho, Europa League, probably not a success. Ole, no trophy, second place, clearly not a success. And now Ranić, which has started like, we don't really know yet. It's only just started. So I don't think that you can say he's been a success in a lot of his roles and decisions made at the club. So yeah, that's really where I stand on it. I would say overall failure. If I had to give him a grade, it'd be towards the bottom end of the alphabet, I think.
It's interesting. Henry Winter has got some reports here from Ed Woodward's camp. And it's interesting that within the report, it mentions that Ed Woodward will stay on United's board until the end of the season to help Richard Arnold settle in. And his final act may be involvement in the appointment of a long-term manager. And from what he's hearing, Eric Ten Hag is the leading candidate now, not Maurizio Pochettino. He goes on to say that those close to Ed Woodward says he feels like he has another big job left in him, preferably in sport, whether in licensing, marketing or data. He still feels so addicted to Manchester United that it would be difficult to consider a job at another club. Also, they point out his heart will remain at United. His frustration is that he knows he leaves United having failed in his main priority, which is creating a structure which he can ensure silverware. He said that he regrets not providing Moyes with a stronger structure. He told staff that he felt he failed Moyes. He thought Moyes could simply step into the office and set up of Alex Ferguson and the show would just roll on. Which I think is quite interesting, John Kermode, because if we skip back and have a look at Ed Woodward's time, he did have, once he took over from Gill and Fergie retired and Moyes came in, about 3 years. And we all remember that Galactico interview, don't we? Where he's like, we can be the next Galacticos. We've got the financial backing. I'm going to go out there and bring in the most impossible players. And it's sort of like he had 4 years as a rabbit in the headlight. And he was getting so much success off the pitch, but was really struggling with these on the pitch deals that actually needed to be made, and was struggling with the direction of the implication of the impact of having that in and around the club, and him saying that, because that's when United tax originally came in, because he came out and said that in an interview. It's almost like he struggled so much with that it took him 4 years to learn. And then he did change his philosophy. He sort of changed to the point when then he told Jose Mourinho, no, you're not going to get that player because I'm not willing to spend that money and they don't fit in with the philosophy of the club. So it's sort of like you can split his tenure in half and sort of go, well, maybe he got it a bit more in the last 4 years, but in the first 4 or 5 years, he was just like a 16-year-old taking a big job at a big company and ran with the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to that summer in 2013, I don't think it was helpful that both Gill and Fergie left at the same time.
Was it an impossible job, John? Do you think it was an impossible job for him?
No, I don't think it was impossible. I don't think it was an impossible job, but I think because basically Fergie was effectively seen as the first director of football, because virtually anything Fergie wanted most of the time he did get. And I think because they were so unprepared for Fergie's announcing his retirement, that meant that when he took over, there wasn't really a structure in terms of moving forwards with when David Moyes, and that's possibly why the reports coming out that he perhaps regrets that about David Moyes. There wasn't a structure really in place for him to succeed. But having said that, though, he in those early years, I do think he tried to be responsible for everything, and that's why we a lot of the transfers around that time were failures, because that first summer under Moyes, we only signed Fellaini, and there were reports we'd signed Thiago, we'd signed Fabregas, and he wasn't experienced in terms of negotiating transfers, and that's why we failed that summer, and that's why Moyes perhaps failed, although he probably failed for other reasons as well. And like you say, it did take him time to get used to the fact that he felt he had to control everything. And then within time, he probably realised that he couldn't control everything and that he was making some bad decisions. You've mentioned the Sanchez deal. I can remember the Di Maria signing, and there were many bad deals that he did. And when you came to Mourinho, yes, and that probably. Mourinho said at the time that the people above him weren't football people. There was no kind of football intelligence in place, and it's taken a very, very long time to have a structure in place which is somewhat decentralised. I mean, we're led to believe that the Rangnick appointment, most of it was done by Murta, and that the interviews for the temporary managerial position, so possibly that might be a good thing. But whereas with Woodward, like you say, he did try to centralise the power too much, and he wasn't ready for the job when he got it. But like we said, he has failed on the job. In terms of the business side, yes, he has attracted a lot of deals, and no doubt we're more financially stable than when he came in. However, like James said, it's Manchester United. You should be able to sell Manchester United. We're arguably the biggest club in the world, and we're part of the biggest league in the world. So, yeah. But overall, he has obviously failed in his role in the football aspect.
I think it's interesting, all points everyone's made about Woodward to this point, because ultimately it depends like what his job specs were under the Glazers. Obviously, these things within business, roles and what you're meant to do and what you're advised to do and need to do are different things from the outside world to the inside world. For instance, Brown Knight's just sent me a tweet, and I probably agree with this more than any tweet I've ever had from Brown Knight. So shout out to him. I haven't seen him about in a little while. I hope he's all right. He's put, Ed Woodward facilitated the Glazers takeover and helped them build this club into a global brand, which obviously would have been part of his remit as a vice executive chairman. His immense contribution to the business side of the club will forever be overshadowed by his unwillingness to relinquish power on the footballing side, which is true to a massive point. And what I mean by to a massive point is that is spot on, because he has helped mold this club into a global brand. And obviously the power of the club has sort of gone to a new level, which is maybe uncontrollable for some fans to accept or want. And the Glazers are at impact of that. Obviously, he's always been a yes man to the Glazers, which again, fans have hated. So ultimately, there's two different sides to look at Woodward here. You need to look at Woodward from a, hey, I work in business. The job is done, actually. It's pretty good from a business point of view. But then we also have to remember, we are Manchester United Football Club, not Manchester United, the business. And ultimately, the footballing side has suffered, like Brown Knight said there, and like you've all said. But again, if I go back to it, and I don't know, Tom, if you want to come in on this.
Yeah, I do.
Di Maria joined the club, even when Schneider didn't join the club, when Daley Blind joined the club, when Darmian joined the club, there was excitement. These were players that were going to do it for Manchester United, and none of them worked out. And I mean, Falcao, it all didn't work out, but he brought some powerhouses to the club. And ultimately, it was the structure of bringing in those powerhouses what deemed them the failure, not him signing off the check, right?
I think you're right in a sense. And obviously, he played a huge part in bringing Paul Pogba back and made it, the world's most expensive transfer. So he obviously did that as well. But I think you talk about his business side of it. Has he failed? Not really, because he's probably done a lot of business deals that are bringing a lot of money into the club. However, one thing he did fail at, and I couldn't believe it when I read it, is the fact of the Daniel James transfer to Leeds United. And I'm reading this because I can't ever remember it. That was only the 7th sale of £10 million or more for a player since he took over. I mean, you name players that have been at this club that we brought in, spent loads of money on, players that we could have sold, we should have sold. Arguably, all right, I'm not being one-eyed here. You'd have thought you'd get more than 10 million for most of them. But yet Daniel James was only the 7th sale of £10 million or more. And
let's not also forget on that as well, Tom. On that, it's almost like they have a contract list and go, oh, I'll forget about this and come back to it.
Yeah.
Like there was, and that's where we talk about structure, and he is still responsible for putting that structure in place, and we've not had that structure. Would you argue, though, Tom, that the structure's better now? But do you think the structure's better now because they've had to put the structure in play for the new guy coming in?
Yeah, it is better now. I think it's, well, I can't say if it's better now or not, actually, let's be honest, because it's not, we're not in a position to judge it yet. I don't think we can judge it. It's all new. It's all going to take time, as it always does, isn't it? But I think we're probably set up better now than what we were. However, another big failure of him is the fact that he failed to do this 8 years ago, rather than wait until 8 years in, I'm off now, United are in the mud. I might set up some structure now, and maybe leave my parting gift as, well, I've give you the platform, that's on you to build it. I think that's completely wrong how he's done that, and he's failed us in that sense. It's frustrating because, again, we find ourselves talking about this guy constantly, but we got to remember the Super League thing seems to have took a bit of a back step. Who was funding that? JP Morgan. Who worked for JP Morgan? Ed Woodward. Ed Woodward worked for JP Morgan when he brought the Glazers to this club. We could sit here and say, he's done bad, he's done good. But in my opinion, it's been catastrophic that he's been at the club in the first place. Because I'm not blaming him for taking the money out of the club. He's not the Glazers himself, but he's a part of that. He's a part of that poison that's done it. So I can't sit here and defend him because I just can't do it. Business-wise, he's been fantastic. Lots of deals. We're always seeing sponsorship deals announced, aren't we? United getting all this money in from sponsors. Yeah, he's bought players back. He spent a lot of money on players. He signed this off, signed that off. But that's all overshadowed for the fact of the biggest point here is the fact it's just not worked, and it's took so long, and it's set us back so far. I'm lost for words on how I could sit here and say it's been a success for him. I do feel for him a little bit, because you don't want to see anybody that's associated with Manchester United failing, no matter who you are. You don't want to see that. We're one of the biggest clubs in the world, biggest club in my opinion. You don't want to see anybody failing, but there has been. I mean, Louis van Gaal hit the nail on the head, didn't he, when he left, saying that when he was at was it Bayern he was at, and he was saying, I was there was footballing men in charge. I went to Manchester United, you got a bloke there that doesn't know anything about football. You're talking again about the same bloke that sold 2014 sold United as the adult version of Disneyland to Jurgen Klopp. I mean, he's not far wrong. Look at it. He's not far wrong. But there's just failings after failings. And the only thing I can say about Ed Woodward now is thanks. Goodbye. Thank you very much for putting this platform in that you've put in. It's a little too late, but goodbye.
It's an interesting message here from Shomafall, who says United fans and pundits are a bit one-eyed sometimes. It's always the Glazers' fault. It's always Ed Woodward's fault. Later, it was Ollie's fault. It's not always that simple. Club issues are multi-dimensional. Yes, but again, when we look at club structure, we have to look at the hierarchy. And if you've got a structure within a business, it should be able to run like a well-oiled machine. But I agree in terms of what you're saying when it comes to there's always a fall guy, there's always a scapegoat, there's always someone to blame. For instance, all the chat at the moment, and I think you mentioned it earlier on, Shomafall, we're actually doing a show later on the unrest around the club and 17 players wanting to leave. It's going to be in our Villa preview. It's on at 9 o'clock. Watch it. Phil Brown Madikins is joining us. Callum is joining us from Beyond the Pitch podcast as well. And we've got Adam Matic, I believe, joining us as well tonight from the United Stand and loads of other stuff. So please join Grant tonight, 9 o'clock. It's going to be a big show and all that. And I expect a bit like Stephen Howson has gone viral for doing. There's going to be a lot of he can fuck off and he can fuck offs on the show tonight. So join them from 9 o'clock.
I didn't know we could say that. I didn't know we could say that. Ed Woodward, fuck off.
I'll just get away with it this one time. Kev says Woodward suffered from a dire case of we are Man United, we do what we want syndrome. His arrogant approach got the best of him. Maybe also, hey, I'm a man who knows how to deal with money. I know what to do with it. Also, finance people, it goes to their head sometimes. It's just one of those. I don't think anyone who works in money, stocks, you could say accounting, you could say finances, they're not all straight A's, are they? Like they know how to get their way around things, and that's not me trying to say that they do anything illegal, but they know how to get their way around things. And like you said, European Super League. I mean, it's a shame it took that. Look, we've gone over nearly 40 minutes now, and we've got a big panel. So sorry that you guys haven't been able to bounce off and say an awful lot. But I do want to come around to each of you and just quickly get one more thought. Let me just quickly go to this comment. Super Nick said, this crisis has been building since Sir Alex Ferguson and Gill left. It's not an overnight change. That's why there's a high chance, or high change of personnel and club in turmoil. But maybe change is good. maybe change helps. Look, there's quite a lot of you watching on YouTube and Facebook. Look, we really want to hit 5K subscribers by the end of this month. It's ambitious, but we really want to do it. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please just smash that subscribe button. I'm not going to tell you to leave your notifications on. You can leave them off if you want, so we don't nag you. But we do a lot of content. We get a lot of fans involved, and we would love you to come and get involved with the channel. So please hit that subscribe button, hit a like on this video, share it as well, get in the live chat. We'll always come over to your comments. Right, John Commode, let me come to you first because you've got a bounce. In your head, in the ideal world, what does the future of Manchester United look like with Richard Arnold at the head?
Ideally, he will continue to do the deals which Woodward was responsible for in terms of like the business side of things. That will continue to have new sponsors coming in all the time and making money for the club, but also to allow more people, more football expertise people to come onto the board and to make decisions in the interest of football. That's what I would like to see, and also to ensure that whoever the manager is, when they take over in the summer, that they're backed to the best their ability, and that they're supported by putting the right structures in place, and that we don't have people who don't have football knowledge making decisions on transfers, and also, but also in terms that's in terms of the team. But we've heard stories about redeveloping Old Trafford. That most certainly needs to happen. And there's talk about potentially building a second ground at Old Trafford, maybe for the women and the reserves, and hopefully it will lead to long-term success. I don't think you can 100% say we're confident about that happening, but hopefully that's ideally what we will like within the next few years or so.
Yeah, but John, thank you for coming on. And Super Nick here sort of reflects on your points. Says at this point, rip it up and start again is imperative. The hierarchy may impede this as long as the revenue is the only priority. And I think it's interesting that we've all got maybe the same thoughts, slightly different thoughts, but ultimately, I think we're all in agreement with one big thing, that something just has to give from the top to the bottom. Thank you, John. Let me quickly come over to James because his battery's running low. James, you've been brilliant. You're welcome on whenever you want again, pal. Thank you for coming in last minute. It's just showing me up with the muscles. That's my only concern.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm known as the buff one on. Oh no, not buff. Anyway,
yeah.
Thank you for jumping on. And I suppose the next question I've got for you is, what does, a bit like I've just asked John, what does the ideal future look like for you with Richard Arnold in charge? What's his biggest challenge, do you think, at this point?
Well, people are going to talk about January transfer windows and summer transfer windows and stuff, and getting in players that suit the Man United way. I want to see people leaving the football club, to be brutally honest, before we bring people in. I think there's been a culture far too long of extending people's contracts, of not being able to sell players. Like was said before, like Tom said, only 7 signings of £10 million or more is an absolute disgrace in the past 8 or 9 years. So there's no way that we can continue with that culture. It's a strange one, really, because I think before last week, Phil Jones would probably be top of all our lists to leave the club. However, he might not be now after that last performance. So it's a strange one, but there are definitely players that are aging, that don't really have a place at the club, that maybe are taking a spot on the bench that some of the younger players could have. So I want to see Richard Arnold come in and work with Ranić and work with Murta and get to a stage where we can remove certain either deadwood or people that need moving on from the club. And then we will obviously be in a position to bring people in from then. But I don't really want to see us just going in and signing people because we think they're better than what we've got. And we've done that for too long. We're Manchester United. We want best in class. We don't want better than what we've got. So, yeah, I think it'll take a few years. I think, unfortunately, if you look next door at how that club's been run over the past 10 years, we're light years behind what they're doing both on and off the pitch. So we need to put something in place, a structure, which we all agree it has got better, but it's still not where it needs to be. We need to put that in place so we can compete on and off the field in the next 5 years. And Richard Arnold is going to be a huge part of that.
So what you're saying, James, is that as long as you get a before, halftime and full-time light show within the next 5 years, you'll be absolutely happy.
Ecstatic, mate. Buy one, get one free on tickets as well. Can we get them?
Coldplay performing at half-time. We'll make it like the Super Bowl, shall we?
Yeah,
oh, mate, thank you. You've been terrific, mate. Thanks for coming on. Actually, you might want to hear this. So what's really weird is that United have got Brian Robson to release a quote on Richard Arnold's hiring.
Very bizarre. Well, he's MUTV though, isn't he? So that's probably where that's come from.
Is he like the chief ambassador or something?
Yeah.
He's one of the foreign ambassadors, I think.
Yeah, he's a big ambassador, yeah. Oh, God.
It's just weird. It's come out and said, I think Richard will want to strengthen the relationship with our fans even further and the foundation. He knows how important it is to work with the community.
Notice how the two words at the start were, I think.
Yeah. I think Richard Arnold is going to deliver us 10 trophies in the next 5 years, guys. I think.
That's your opinion, mate.
I think he might. I hope, and I think he will be better than what he was on this morning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe. That's a reference, by the way, for anyone who's ever watched UK TV. And if you haven't, then just tell Tom he's not funny. That's all you need to tell him. At the end of the day, we know Tom's favourite's Richard and Judy anyway. I mean, ultimately, we'll leave him at that. He watches GB News with Eamon Holmes. That's where Tom is at the moment.
Oh, God.
Eamon Holmes is a legend anyway. He's a United fan. We should all
He's a
back
United
him.
fan, I suppose.
He is.
Yeah. Right, let's go over to some more. By the way, James, you can drop out. If you're about to go, man, you can drop out now. Thank you for coming in. Same to you, John.
Cheers, James.
Take care, guys.
You, Fred,
Thank you,
quickly. In an ideal, oh God, that's not good. Well, some people would say that's a good camera angle.
Hang on.
In an ideal world, Fred, what does the future look like with Richard Arnold taking Ed Woodward's place at the helm?
Yeah, just look, prioritising football and setting a culture that continues the core principles of the club, like developing the youth, playing attractive and successful football on the pitch. Develop the stadium, develop the women's team, and the local community, because that's what the club's there for. We're an elite club. We need to be the best in class at all aspects, including the footballing and non-footballing matters. And I think most importantly, just regain the trust of the supporters. It's such a fragmented fan base at the moment. He just needs to regain the trust, make the decisions that focus first and foremost on the footballing side of things. And hopefully with a united fan base, united dressing room, we can progress as a club and win some trophies going forward. But there's a lot to do. I don't think the benefits are going to be reaped in the short term. He needs to set a long-term strategy and stick to it, because our neighbours have had far too much success and they've shown us up for too many years, and we want our perch back.
Yeah. Before I come to you with the same question, Tom, just very briefly from each of you, and it could be just a yes or a no. Do you think Richard Arnold's biggest decision, because I think he'll ultimately be the one at the helm of it, even with Woodward on the board, is who manages the club next? Because that's going to set a precedent, surely, for his tenure over the next 10, 20 years, maybe. And at the moment, there's so much unrest, so much uncertainty, so much confusion, really, over the direction that we're going in. We've brought in an interim manager that likes to play a certain way. We've got players that aren't happy. Surely the next manager has to resemble in some way the culture that Rangnick's trying to implement. Plus, then he's going as a consultant. So, just quickly, yes or no, Fred? Do you think that ultimately the hire in the summer, or what happens in the summer with the new manager, is maybe going to be Arnold's biggest decision at this point?
100%. I think in terms of the non-footballing, staff above the manager, that's already been set. Whether he had to say in that, or that was Woodward's decision, that's been set, and nothing's going to change on that regard in terms of Murto, Fletcher, Rangnick. The manager, going one level down, the manager is the next biggest decision. And I think the big thing will be if he decides to either go with his own choice, or if he trusts Murto, Rangnick, Fletcher, etc., and they have a sort of consensus around that. It's going to be very telling, the next manager, especially if it's someone whose principles are aligned with Rangnick. There needs to be that consistency, that consensus. If that's the avenue we're going down in terms of style of play, in terms of which players we're going to recruit, there's a big chain reaction to to the decision of who the next manager is going to be, which is going to impact us in the next 3 to 5 years minimum. So yeah, 100%. That's his biggest decision in the next few months.
Tom, agree? Biggest decision he's going to make?
I think if I can, I'm actually going to try and do a piece on All for United for this, because I think this is huge. Basically, I think you're right, yes. But I honestly think this appointment is the biggest appointment since Fergie left. This is the most crucial appointment. The next manager of Manchester United has to be right. If they get it wrong, then everything that we've built up to now, from Woodward leaving, Ranić originally coming in, possibly going upstairs, Fletcher going into that football consultancy role, Murta in there. Whoever makes that next decision, which it probably will be Arnold, with whoever hands from everybody else, this is the biggest Manchester United manager appointment I can think of since Alex Ferguson left. All right, it was huge to replace Fergie. It didn't work. That was huge because what he did and what he built, the success that he brought, to try and carry that on, to get somebody to do that, was a massive decision to make who you want to bring in. However, if you look back of all the managers we've been through, be it Mourinho, Van Gaal, Moyes himself, Solskjaer, they all had to do a job. They all had to bring success to this club. Arguably, you could say some of them did, some of them didn't. Depends on how you clarify success, or maybe not success, maybe progression. But this next appointment is the biggest in the club's history, I believe. Honestly, I do. Because if it doesn't go right, everything we're talking about, everything we've worked for to this point, is all for nothing.
Yeah, and also on that, the next appointment can't just be, will they get us through the next season? They get us through the next 6 months? Whatever happens in the next season, that manager has to be in charge the season after.
Yeah, this is a 3-4 year job.
This is a 3-4 year job, because although we said that Solskjaer coming into the club was going to reset the culture and he was going to lay the foundations for the next manager, I think unfortunately for him, because of the personnels and the egos, we're at the Jose Mourinho stage again, where there's just so much unrest, and there needs to be a clear out again, and there needs to be new players brought in and a new philosophy brought into the club. And when I say the word philosophy, which is very Van Gaal-esque, I mean more a culture reset again, But it's remembering who Manchester United are versus knowing that football's moved on. Football's moved on an awful lot. And United don't just need to go back to being Manchester United, but also need to be a new Manchester United that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I think that's where we've got to change. And that's where we've got to let footballing people do what footballing people need to do. And we need to let coaches do what coaches need to do. And we need to go on a bit of an evolution. And I'll tell you what, the one thing that makes me think that's going to come, they're going to get it right, and it's going to happen, is actually what's happening right now with Ethan Laird. Yeah. So Ethan Laird is a very hot prospect, and he always has been. And he's obviously gone on a few loans. He went to MK Dons last season. He played a bit for the reserves. He's obviously gone to Swansea this year. Now, he's done really freaking well at Swansea, playing in a 5 at the back. And he's playing really well, but Swansea aren't competing. They're not on all fronts. They're not playing in a United system. They're not at that level. Whereas Bournemouth, where he's going to be signing for next, are competing at the top of the table. They've got an experienced team of Premier League coaches and Scott Parker, who's obviously managed in the Premier League there. They've got a lot of experienced Premier League defenders and players in that Bournemouth side. So Ethan Laird is now going to go and play football at a club which is at a Premier League standard, despite being in the Championship. Now, that tells me United want him back in that first team squad next year. Yeah. And if Laird is now being readied to play first team football from the first game of next season, what a way to be managed. For me, that shows the club have a plan for an individual player. And that's not happened once. You've seen Greenwood come into the squad as a prolific number 9. And not look further away as a number 9 at the moment, playing out on the wings. You saw Rashford storm onto the scene as a goal poacher, as a finisher, as the next best striker. He now can't even put a shift in out on the wing because he keeps being chopped and changed out of position. So for me, what's important is the club have a plan, not just to breed success on the pitch, but to breed the next best players and to be able to get the best out of them. And I'm starting to see that transition a little bit with the way that Laird is being managed. With the fact that Chong wasn't rushed back to the club and cancelled on his loan. He's still going to be going back there. I just feel like there's opportunity here. Alanga being in and around the squad because the effort is being put in. So Maybe it's it's a forced confidence. I'm slightly confident that whether it's Ten Hag, whether it's Pochettino, they are going to have a base to build on. But also the club, I agree. Did you say it, Tom? I can't remember who said it. It might have been you who said it. No, James said it. We have to put our foot down this window and in the summer. You don't want to be here, you go.
Yeah.
Like, even if you get rid of Martial, Lingard, like, and so to speak, I know he doesn't want to go, but like Cavani, like, obviously may go in the summer. It looks like the contract's out in the summer. Even if they go at reduced fees or a little amount or for free, you're still saving about 100 million a year in wages on 6 or 7 players. It's that bonkers, the finances in football. So, yeah, it's not about not being good enough. I don't know if you're talking to me here, Adrian, but you're saying Pogba and Fernandes not being good enough. It's
I
about
think there's a conversation in the chat.
It's about them being a part of the plan and being able to fit into where United are going. And that's my issue with Rangnick coming in. Rangnick was never going to play or build a team around Bruno Fernandes. He was going to implement a system and tell footballers to play this way. You don't get short-term success by doing that. And that's my issue with, at the moment, we're getting to this another day.
Yeah.
You've got to build slow with Rangnick.
It's endless.
Everything's going to get worse before it gets better. And if it gets better, it's probably because of personnel and who we're digging out now more than it is actually because of the system. So look, it's really, really interesting. The club just needs to grow the right way. I want to see a plan. I want to see Richard Arnold implement a plan. And on that, Tom, they're my thoughts on, in an ideal world, how does Arnold and the team get this right? It's all about that next manager hire for me. That's how they get it right. And the future that's bright, the future that's Argentinian, the future that's Pochettino for me. Fucking love Poch. Tell me, Tom, what for you is an ideal future under Richard Arnold's leadership?
It's going to sound corny, but I just want stability. I want stability on the pitch, in the coaching staff, in the infrastructure, from the top to the bottom. Manchester United needs that stability back. And I don't like talking too much about the past, because it's a good saying, if you're looking behind you, you're going to bump into things in front of you. So I think we need to just look forward, right the wrongs, learn from everything. Arnold needs to do this as well. Learn from everything, look at everything, study it, what went wrong through the last 8 years, look at it, just make sure you're doing your best to go, right, we learn from that. And that's all I ask. Like, we spent £1 billion. We were saying we spent £1 billion since he took over, right? Since Fergie went and he took over as well, after that. That's the same as Manchester City. But you look at the quality that they bought and what we've done. It's embarrassing. I don't want that to happen anymore. We've got to get footballing guys in footballing positions to make footballing decisions to make sure that we are consistently getting back to where we belong. And I know it's not earned. You've got to earn it. We can't sit here and say, oh, we're Manchester United, we deserve to be on top. We can, we're Manchester United fans, but it shouldn't be like that. You have to earn it. So again, like you were saying there, Ben, if you don't want to be at the club, go. I'd rather play some young lad that's chomping at the bit, prove his point, show that he wants to be here, put a bit of fight in and go get results. And it means so much more than it would to have these overrated wannabe players that think they're great, but they're really not, because they're bog average every week in, week out. I'd rather have young lads chomping at the bit to get in and play for Manchester United than that. But ideal situation from here on out for me, like I said, is stability. I want to see relationships between the players and the staff and the respect and the honor put back into being part of this club. I want to see the coaches putting effort in. I want to see them taking people accountable. Don't protect players. If someone's not putting the effort in, call them out. If they're going to cry about it, they're not good enough. Use that as inspiration. Like I was speaking the other day, I don't want to go off topic too much, about taking the armband off Maguire. People were saying, oh yeah, but what's that going to do for his confidence? It should do world wonders for his confidence, because if taking one of the biggest responsibilities in English football away from you isn't going to spur you on and give you the kick up the arse that you need to be a better player, then nothing will. So I want to see improvements all across the board, from the top to the bottom, structure, stability, and some logical thinking to take this club back to the promised land. And that's all I ask for.
I think it's interesting. You mentioned Maguire there, and Shomerful here said, sorry, not that one. His other comment. Sorry, Shomerful. Nice talk, guys. Thank you, pal. Really appreciate you in the comments. There's some really good stuff this show. So please come back, hit subscribe, and get in that live chat. I hope you talk about the one player nobody talks about in your United Crisis episode. Tell us who that player is at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, we're going to be talking about the 17 players that potentially won out. We're going to be talking about the mess as it is at the moment. We're going to be going over Rangnick's system and talking about how important a cup run could be for Manchester United and our season in our Aston Villa preview. Set a reminder. The stream's set up now. You can check it out on the All for United YouTube homepage. So join us at 9 o'clock for that. Thank you guys for joining me. Tom, thank you for jumping on. Fred, John, James as well, who was on the show. Thank you everyone for jumping in. Thank you for jumping in the live chat. Subscribe to All for United. Share this far and wide. We did a little bit within here. I don't know if you guys have seen it. You might have to rewind a bit where we revealed a little bit more about who Richard Arnold is. We also spoke a little bit more about the noise coming out of Ed Woodward's camp, where he feels his failures were. We discussed a little bit about that, whether he was a success, whether he is a failure. I think Tom, very strong opinion on that, which obviously is fair enough, and I think we all have. And also, we spoke a little bit about the feelings from Reds on the breaking news. So hit like, get in the comments if you're watching this later on. What have you made of Ed Woodward's time here? What do you make of Richard Arnold's hire? And ultimately, in a dream world, where does Richard Arnold take us? Where do you want him to take us? Get that in the comments as well. For now, we're going to sign out. We'll be back live at 9 o'clock, so make sure you join us then. Take care, guys. Stay safe. Bye for now.